And it makes it seem like there's something they're hiding. Like, what are they hiding if they're so afraid to talk about it? What they're hiding is that the question itself leads to a level of skepticism that you're not allowed to have. That's what it's about. You're not allowed to be skeptical about the screen itself. Like, they're fine with you going and listening to Coast and wondering, are there pyramids on Mars? No, that's a conspiracy theory, silly. There's no pyramids on Mars. The Mars rovers would have shown us. So these people are both arguing from the fiction that Mars is a landable place where we have rovers, but they're fighting over whether or not there's pyramids on Mars. That's coast to coast. That's gate-kept reality. The flat Earth question says we've never been to Mars, much less can we make an argument for there being pyramids there. I heard this description of a sales technique where they talk about how if you can get somebody debating on whether they're going to get white or black or arguing on the features of the car, you've already made the sale. And when they get you arguing over the features of Mars, they've already built in the assumption that Mars is as described. They've already got you to accept that premise. And the flat Earth question denies that premise, rejects it from the get-go. Obey NASA, says the unmediated mind. Yeah, that was our message from the Obamas. They had a few messages for us. Nice, kind people. They said, obey NASA and die 666. Thrustazar says, what is Mars? Good question. Look, I don't deny reality. I have no doubts about the veracity of the claims made from here on the ground as far as the observational data. You can get a telescope, you can see it. But I don't trust the telescopes that are in space, like the one that showed us the space salami. I don't believe that there's anything in space. And I think they take a step away from reality. When we get into the ISS Cyber Symposium, one of the points I'm going to bring up is the fact that you have millions of pictures of astronauts with cameras taking pictures of the Earth and smiling, but you never see over their shoulder. You never see over their shoulder. You see them taking photos, then you see the photos, but you never see them in the shot taking the photo of the thing. And this is a big deal. It's a sleight of mind, and it sounds like nuance, but for example, I don't trust ISS transits. If you think you can go outside and see the space station, record it with your camera. Don't set up a special night at a special time at a special location where you can catch the silhouette of it in front of the moon. Because that means we can't see it. Because there's nothing to reflect it, you don't see it until there's a silhouette. It means there's no eyewitness. It means we have to trust that the video editor didn't insert something. So why even create room for doubt? Or a solar transit. You can't see it during the day, but you can see the silhouette through a solar filter. No eyewitness. Nobody's recording the eyewitness perspective. So you get many examples, again, of astronauts at the cupola with their cameras photographing the Earth from that seat that looks like the Millennium Falcon, which is probably a reference to the Aeon of Horus. But anyway, the Millennium Falcon window in the ISS. They're taking pictures, but you never see over their shoulders. And the reason why is that you would see a movie set. All right, joined by Cincinnati's #1 IPS auto hoax correspondent, Art of Thinking Out Loud. Awesome, thanks for checking in. And by the way, we have Auto Hoaxology 101 is going to be out very soon. And I'm going to plan on making a few stops at a few places. And more details will follow after the first Cyber Symposium. But the idea is to do, I'm not going to call these conferences, but kind of a small-scale meetups, very targeted on very specific issues, for the sole purpose, though, of making arguments premised on everything established in that book, and then use that book to help create the breakaway from alt media. We're breaking a huge chunk off of we're breaking a section of the guardrail off the political horseshoe on the right side. I don't care to mess with the woke or the blue pill, but the red pill community that is being guardrailed back into politics, if we break a section of that guardrailing, they will hemorrhage tens of thousands of would-be brainwashees into the off-world stage perspective. It'll be a disaster. I mean, I really think that, judging by the reaction of mainstream media to the advent of the flat earth question, and I'm not even saying the earth is flat, I'm saying the flat earth question. It's a question. It's not an assertion. There's a big difference. And it's not just asking questions. It's a challenge to the premise that the screen is authority. Again, ever since then, the censorship has ramped up. And not only that, but they don't even try to hide it. The way they choked up the search filters on YouTube. It's like, what are they afraid of? And so they're not afraid of the shape of the world being challenged. I think they're afraid of their authority being challenged. And by they, I don't just mean one single news network. I mean the monolithic media construct itself. The filter, the hoodwink. They don't want you to take the hoodwink off. They need you to stay and remain in their imposed ignorance, in the wilderness of darkness. You're not allowed to have the hoodwink taken off unless it's with their cult behind closed doors and you sign their NDAs and take their blood oaths. All right, let's continue here. Thrustazar says Trump was big on the fake force. Yeah, this is what happened in 2016. A lot of people were like us, they were figuring things out, but then they said, wait a minute, Trump and Q are real and they're going to save us, and Trump has Space Force. And I'm like, wait a minute here. And they said no, and they said Q says the world's not flat. So all of a sudden, you had this kind of a break where someone had to decide, do we want to continue on this path of challenging the media's assumption of being, its position as the sole authority, or do we want to get behind this particular person who is playing like he's going rogue? And a lot of people kind of turn their back on objectivity. This happened in 2016, and it's because Space Force. They had to kind of go with the mainstream, and a lot of people decided that the Las Vegas event was real. They decided that, yeah, that was real. It was the deep state trying to make Trump look bad. It was an attempted assassination. They had all kinds of stories. And we lost half the Discord server because they said, you auto hoaxers go too far. And it's like, well, we did step beyond the screen. We stepped away from it. And meanwhile, you guys went through it. And that screen is the dividing line. And again, I talked about Tim Pool. I was listening to his podcast earlier. And the way they treated this topic shows that they're not equipped to handle what we are positing here. They really aren't, which is great. They're insulated and they're blinkered, or they're compromised. But whatever it is, there's not going to be any competition. There's not going to be any gatekeeping. There's not going to be anything that will stop what we're doing. And what we're doing here is what the red pills falsely advertise as being capable of doing. You don't break free the matrix. You don't get off the grid mentally by playing into their bifurcated mind games and taking a side. Cygirl says, only one side of a flat moon, like the image of a mirror reflected in a pool of water. Yeah, I'm very intrigued by that cluster of craters that happens to seemingly fit the same arrangement of the continents we know of. The whole Vibes of Cosmos, Sturgio Studios 10 thing. And even that, it is a great example of something where, whether or not it's true, it's a remarkable series of coincidences. And it's so remarkable that to say it's not there is reality denialism. And it opens up a few areas. I mean, if true, then what? If this Sturgio Studios 10 thing is true, then the world we live in or on is much bigger, at a very minimum. Cygirl says, so many flogging the Vegas event, so many grifters and shills. Try to listen to Jason Aldean. His music sucks. Jason Aldean, how old was Jason Aldean during the Vegas shooting? Which was predicted on an Illuminati playing card. There's so much about that event and so many grifters. So many people still today say, oh, it was done by black helicopters. No, there's a helipad nearby. It wasn't done. Nobody died. Nobody cried. 50 of the same victims were shot at again 13 months later at another country music concert. Concurrent with the drill based on Vegas being conducted down the street with 50 crisis actors. Anybody who still believes in Vegas hasn't done their research. And then you can add to it, the chief of police at the time is now the chief of police in Maui, where they had the fake fire disaster on 8/8, with all the fake burned cars, all the movie props, and the fake dead kids that all the truthers were pining about. It's like, I thought you guys were worried about the traffic children from The Sound of Freedom, but now you're like worried about dew children burned by Chinese space lasers. And a lot of them were like, you say no kids died? I'm like, yeah, no one died. This is just TikTok rumors from paid operatives. And, they cried, they were mad, but then a few weeks later they didn't care anymore. I'm like, wait, you don't care about the Maui kids anymore? Because the next thing, I guess, was Israel, and now it's the Hamas children. The current thing, like, which dead kids do we give an F about this month? But they're all fake. The fake dead kid industrial complex. Just follow the money. Where's it all going? Who's making all the money? It's the guys making the hyper-realistic surgical training dummies that breathe and bleed. Psy Girl says Gaza is the Ben-Hur of staged events. Yeah, that's my take on it. It's Wag the Dog. It's a stale old soap opera, running around with these rubber dolls, parading around with these fake martyrs. And I called it out one morning. I was like, look, there's like 20 dead kids lined up on the sidewalk. All of them have perfectly closed mouths and closed eyes. Now, unless they were embalmed and their mouths were wired shut and their eyelids glued shut, or they used the inserts, their mouths would be open and their eyes would be open, and it would be unsightly and tragic. But no, they looked peaceful, like a bunch of dolls that were dirtied up by the art department. And after I talked about that, like a week later, they brought out this one with open eyes, but that one was obviously rubber, like a literal bouncing baby. And the Jerusalem Post called it out, like, look, Hamas is parading around a doll and it's fake. And then like a week later, like, no, wait, this is real. Wait a minute here. It was fake, now it's real. How does that work? And that's when I coined desert of the designated real, which is where we are right now. Where in the future, if something is designated real, it's going to have a stamp from the government because it's going to be indistinguishable from the fake. Frank Murr says, Madal collection. Yeah. Well, one thing about these dolls, I mean, they don't grin. They don't have that duper's delight. I mean, crisis actors got it. That's something they can actually cry about. They don't have a future. The Screen Actors Guild, Hollywood, they can protest. We're not going to be replaced by AI. You can't replace us. But the crisis actors don't have that representation. They're not really the Government Actors Guild. I made that up. There is no gag. We just call them the gag. But the gag gang has no representation, and they're going to be replaced by rubber dolls and CGI, and they're going to be out of work. In fact, we did this South Pole episode with out-of-work crisis actors. We actually called them the Sandy Hookers. One of them was like, was it? Oh man, I'll have to get back to that episode because Bill Gates is driving around in his limo and he's picking up these crisis actor for his commercials. I think they were shooting a commercial for. It was really bad. We'll have to go back and revisit some of the stuff, but I believe it was Vaxdash, and then there was another one. It was something about the Joker smile, which I probably shouldn't even get into. We'll get banned. They were so sensitive about that topic as well, which gave the impression that they didn't want you talking about it. But again, it's one of these things where they get you to take a side so that you can be identified, polarized, and then nullified. Yeah, that's right, Salty Siren. Need me to cry for your agit prop? That's right. They were on the side of the road trying to get gigs. Diana South says, stop the rubber baby mannequin sex trafficking. Yeah, no kidding. They probably deliver them in Wayfair cabinets. No, I actually think Wayfair conspiracy theory came back recently. And Tim Ballard was pushing that one, and that was meant to be taken seriously. Unbelievable how this Q universe persists. They haven't rescued a single dead child. Now, this might just be predictive programming. Times Square went dark for the first time. All 27 billboards of Times Square, New York went dark. And then they played some Christmas thing. And this got me thinking. I believe in Matrix Part 2, they did a blackout after they went. I had to go to the movie, but I'm pretty sure they blacked out 27 blocks. Second Matrix movie. I'll dig that up later. But they blacked out Times Square. What does that mean? Must be something. And it's just for a moment, but again, it's the first time 27 billboards went dark. All right, let's continue here. David Icke, reptilians, we talked about that already. Yeah, reptilians, evil aliens, that stuff's all coming back. Now, I mentioned this the other day. Mickey Mouse will be public domain next week. Disney loses all control over him. And it reminded me, last October, Dolly had to be lobotomized because people were using it to create images that they thought were things that we shouldn't be able to imagine. And one image was this, and this is from Sage. I wonder how Disney feels about Microsoft building a Bing app that generates AI pictures of Mickey Mouse hijacking a plane on 9/11. And it's a hilarious picture. I mean, I like it. I would get this as a poster. And now you could probably sell it because Disney can't control it. But I think it's interesting that this came out and this Mickey Mouse 9/11 image was used as justification for censoring this image generator. They want to censor how you use your imagination through their technology here, which allows you to materialize or manifest things you think of. It's all thought control. But it's interesting considering that they're losing control of Mickey next week. So I'm wondering, is this some kind of foreshadowing about how maybe AI is going to 9/11 the internet? You see what I mean? Like there's some kind of foreshadowing here. So here's a couple of headlines on this topic if you haven't checked up on this one. Mickey and Minnie Mouse will no longer be owned by Disney. Mickey Mouse is becoming public domain. Mickey Mouse, long a symbol in copyright wars, to enter public domain, beginning January 1st. Mickey Mouse officially being retired effective immediately. So there you have it. There's something up with Mickey Mouse. But again, the fact that Mickey Mouse hijacking a plane and crashing into the Twin Towers was the excuse for censoring and lobotomizing Dolly, a little portentous, if you ask me. Girl asks about Donald Duck. I read somewhere that others may follow. But I don't know what it means exactly, other than the 9/11 thing. Again, AI is 19, 19, like 19 hijackers. And we see this AI code with lots of big world transformative psyops. Pearl Harbor, Operation AI, Gaia, the Global AI Alliance. Again, this is an artist's impression of more space bullshit. I mean, space junk. Again, I had to ask, why can't they just show us a photograph of the Earth surrounded in space junk? They can show us pictures of the oceans full of junk, but we can't get any images of space junk in space. We only get these artist impressions. Nobody questions this either. Like NASA's art department. Like, yeah, we need a picture of space junk, and then you get this guy and he gets some acrylic paint out and a canvas. Like, why? Girl says, the first thing I thought about with the 40 beheaded babies, did they make sure and dump them out of the incubators first? And you know that the testimony of Naira about the incubator babies was 33 years from the day. 33 years later, it was October 10th, 1990, and then October 10th, 2023. The beheaded the beheaded Israeli babies by Hamas, that was 33 years to the day of the incubator babies. It's just perfect. All right, continuing. Apocalyptic on X. What do we have here? We mentioned the Dukes of Hazzard because one of the Dukes of Hazzard guys is being investigated by the Secret Service because he said that Biden needed to be hanged. Well, this is a MAGA type, and I think we're going to see more of this in the coming weeks.
John Snyder made the statement.
Now, again, I want to point out, this is a regular MAGA guy who is following in the wake of one of the Dukes of Hazzard, like a TV character, saying something about Biden and getting investigated by the Secret Service. And I'm pretty sure this guy's going to be receiving a visit too.
That Biden should be hung for treason. And then he gets, that's a threat? No, that's not a threat. Man, what is wrong with you people? So let me make this clear. Biden should be hung for treason. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me correct that. Biden should suffer the penalty for treason.
Now, this is not new. QAnoners have been fantasizing about hanging Democrats forever. But this is in response to Dukes of Hazzard actor John Snyder called for public hanging of Joe Biden in a deleted social media post. So he deleted it. Dukes of Hazzard star probed after calling for Biden hanging. So what does this mean? Well, if we talk about in the context of the Turner Diaries and this general psyop, left versus right, you can't separate this from the General Lee, the Confederate flag. So it's all coming together nicely. So the Dukes of Hazzard guy making that statement invokes this. And then you have, of course, how does it work? I guess it's psyops imitate art and life imitates psyops. And now you have someone following along with an actor, and he's probably going to get himself into trouble.
Whatever that might be. Because he has committed it, and he is guilty of it.
Yep, exactly. Demetra 101 says, get this man a bowl cut. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Could be a Fed. I mean, look, what kind of what would he be doing on TikTok anyway? I find a lot of these individuals questionable. Looks like a federal informant. He did something bad, and he's getting paid. He's working off his debt to society somehow by saying crazy things on the internet. Synchromorpheus posted this the other day on a related note here. Speaking of Dukes of Hazzard, Uncle Jesse from Dukes of Hazzard with an OG MAGA hat. Very interesting. Now, the hats may be a big part of this. There's a lot of symbolism in hats. White hats are actually the hats of the 33rd degree. But now there's more. I'm talking about Dukes of Hazzard. Again, this is just more symbolism building into this general unfolding story. I want to bring this up. This is from The Economist. This is before the MAGA hat. Okay, this is before Trump. This is 2013. The Economist. And you have a man in a red hat sitting inside of a broken, cracked Q. But the Q is actually the male symbol, but it's pointed down because, of course, it's impotent and broken. He's wearing a red hat pre-MAGA. So it says the weaker sex. No jobs, no family, no prospects. The foreshadowing here is pretty obvious. That MAGA would be used through Q as part of this general takedown of this certain, I guess, it's iconoclasm. But they're like with Ken, the acceptable male in the future in Barbie Land, which is just Babylon, is going to be superfluous and castrated, essentially. Not literally necessarily, but what we're seeing here again is just the future being predicted. And I think the red hat symbolizes that section, that demographic that was being targeted for destruction. I mean, what else can you say about the Q movement and January 6th then? This has all been an attack on conservatism, on American nationalists. It's all a controlled opposition takedown. But again, the weaker sex, red hat, obvious Q symbolism in this years before both. Let's see what else we have here. Mango Penguin says race shouldn't even be an issue nowadays. It's repetitive nonsense. It's insanity to accept this as the norm. Yeah, I thought people were kind of over race, and I kind of felt like the gender cards were being brought in as the new race cards because race cards weren't working anymore. And I think that might still be true. Because what we're really looking at here is collectivism, collectivist politics. That's why I take the position I do, off-world stage, because I can see it for what it is. The racial stuff, specifically from the right, is about blood purity, and it's very similar to a religion in its structure. It's very similar to the pandemic model of the religion of scientism in its structure. Goo blood, pure blood, racial purity, the idea is all the same and it has the same solutions. But ultimately, it's groupthink, compartmentalization for easily compartmentalized minds. And the whole purpose of the off-world stage perspective is recognizing all of the compartments and not stepping into any of them. Okay, let me play this clip here. This is from Tucker Carlson, since he's been talking as of late about how we're confronting the demonic, the dark. And here he's talking about how this is at Turning Point. This is from last week.
Threatens you.
And he's specifically talking about how this is a spiritual movement, that what is threatening us is not a political movement, it's a spiritual movement. And I'm bringing this up because they also had Michael Cassidy come up on stage and speak, and he's the guy that destroyed the Satan statue.
What threatens you is not a political movement, it's a spiritual movement. The plan can only end in true sadness and tears and weeping and gnashing of teeth.
So it's kind of low right there, but basically it's a spiritual movement, and it's going to end with the gnashing of teeth and fire and brimstone, etc. This is Michael Cassidy, who's now been on Fox. He's been with Jesse Waters. Navy vet defends beheading of Iowa Capitol's satanic Baphomet statue. So this is no longer conservative views. It's no longer limited government. This is now Christo-fascism. There's no other way to describe it. And the leaders, the ideological leaders of this, are all Pizzagate affiliated types who are congratulating him. And now here he is hanging out at Turning Point or America Fest, speaking with the, I guess, the vanguard of American nationalism. Not to mention he's 1 degree separated from the president. Look, this is a criminal act. Just replace the goat head statue you don't like with something you don't care for, something you would care for. And it's the same premise here. So he's destroying property, he's destroying a religious thing. It is a crime. And as such, it shouldn't be applauded that you destroy the enemy's idols, but that's where we're at. It's very leftist of them. And I never liked the idea of the political horseshoe. Like, no, I don't think it's true that the far left and the far right begin to resemble each other. But the far right is at the point where they're pulling down statues. Yeah, they're pretty much the same. But I don't make the total equivalency, because obviously left is married to big government and right is at least heading in the right direction, but they're misled. So their hearts are in the right place. Big difference. Yeah, that's right. Celine says Kevin Spacey sounded like AI talking to Tucker Carlson. So Kevin Spacey was on the Tucker Carlson program in character, in his House of Cards character. I don't find it entertaining, and I can hardly listen to him because of all these accounts of him being so gropey and manipulative, and then he accuses, or people accuse him, and then they die. That's all very creepy. And one other point. Kevin Spacey, according to the QAnons, is one of those who received this blue ribbon from Obama, which meant that they were all going to Gitmo to get killed. So Kevin Spacey, according to the Q crowd, was a pedovore who was already hanged in Guantanamo. So what is he doing hanging out with Tucker Carlson? Like, that's kind of weird in itself, too. It's a constant thing with them. They're constantly having to account for their prophecies not being true, or they're constantly having to account for dead people coming back to life, like Hillary Clinton coming back to life. Like, that's inconvenient. Tim Osman says, Stavely was live debunking you earlier. Oh, okay. Okay, I thought he was promoting us because he thinks that autohoaxology is cutting edge fact finding and much better than reality fluidity, which is actually mainstream, FYI. Reality fluidity is mainstream. It's the mainstream scientific paradigm. The Mandela Effect, CERN, reality shifts. And they'll say, oh, we have nothing to do with CERN. Oh, you don't? Why don't you tell that to the inventor of your cult? It wasn't Nelson Mandela. It wasn't Egg McMahon. It was Fiona Fitzgerald Broom, a necromancer, who claims that CERN created a rift and now we're getting these little glitches. But they've kind of taken her creation, started their own denominations, and they've run with it. They've called me the God blocker. They said that what I'm doing by taking people away from the Mandela Effect is I'm taking them away from the one true path to God. Selena says, there's a photo of Kevin Spacey and Ghislaine Maxwell sitting on a throne. I've seen that. Yeah, exactly. This is all very questionable to me. Kevin Spacey and Ghislaine Maxwell on a throne at Buckingham Palace. This was taken in 2002. She also had sex with JFK Jr., which is also kind of strange. It was one of her famous conquests. She used to brag about it. And she was also pictured ominously in the background. I mean, she photobombs everyone with JonBenet Ramsey, aka Kate Perry. And she also photobombed Elon Musk, and he denies that he knew she was there. Although she claims that when they were there at this Vogue event, she and Musk were talking about, well, she was warning Musk that they needed to shut down the internet before it destroys us all. Okay, let me go to Gilded really quick. Someone requests it. I sent this image to NASA. I said, how come we can see lights on the dark side and city lights, but stars in the background when normally it's pitch black? And I asked this question because it's a valid question, but this is obviously pixel art. But I was wondering if NASA would notice. Like, can they tell if it's pixel art? Alright, I'm going over to the Gilded. I believe we have some memes I have to go through, and some links. Oh, Stavely was triggered and he deleted the video. Darn. Well, that's too bad. You have to screen cap. Now, did he delete the video? Or did reality shift? Because that could have happened. You could have just seen a live Mandela effect. Like, here you are watching a Mandoozle live stream and then it's gone. It's like, did it really go? Or does it still exist and you're no longer in that reality? Like, check your underwear for a cornucopia on the label. Check your Ford logo for a swirly. Just ground yourself to see which reality you're in. I'm still looking to see if there's anybody who can claim that their family's wealth came from Ed McMahon. Like, where are these people who received the money, or their family grew up in a mansion and like, where do we get the money from? Oh, grandma got a check from Ed McMahon. Tim Osman says he deleted YouTube. Okay, he's on Rumble. Okay, cool. Immature discussions of reality, disinfo artists, and the deluded ones. Okay, that was about me. I was like, wow, immature discussions of reality. Who's he talking about? It's just supremely ironic because these are people who say reality doesn't exist. Like, why do you even care about 9/11 and nobody dying if reality's always shifting? You know, maybe 6 million died on 9/11. Like, reality's fluid. If it really is, but no, it's not. But I'll go ahead and I'll follow up and see. I'll critique his criticisms. I'm always open to criticism. I'd like to know what other people think. But all we're really standing on here is objective reality, which they say doesn't exist. And you can't say the news is fake if there is no objective reality. Because what is news reporting on? If news is reporting on a shifting reality, then the news isn't really news. It's just an ever-changing, shifting mirror. It doesn't mean anything. But if there is an objective reality, and the news is lying, then you can point out the discrepancies. But if you're claiming that there is no objective, then there can be no discrepancy. You no longer exist in truth. It's a form of solipsistic mind game, like Haley's. Is it Haley's Comet? Hale-Bopp? Really, at this point, it's a breakaway reality. Might as well move into a bunker and have a bunch of Mandela affected children. Because where else are you going to go with it? And I'm not knocking the Mandela effect as much as I'm criticizing their refusal to acknowledge the real source of it, which I think is enlightening. I think it's helpful to understand how we can be fooled and tricked. We were all tricked by the TV. The assumption that, oh, you can trust it as an authority. These are things that they put to screen you from reality. And a lot of the tricks are sleights of mind that involve logical fallacies, loaded questions, a smuggled premise here, a divine fallacy there, and you're in Wonderland. And here I am saying, hey, let's go ahead and exit their matrix. And they're going into an alt matrix that was actually created to reinforce the dominant paradigm. And we can fix it. All right, moving on here. And look, there's nothing new. I think that the Mandela effect is similar to miracles. Miracles in religions, like fake miracles are fake. Just say it. And these are things that give people reason to believe, and believers separate from non-believers. But there's a point where they no longer care about objective facts. Their main argument is everybody knows. And that's not an argument. And does everybody know? I don't think you can make that argument. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open phones here if anybody wants to call in. Just a moment here. Unmuted. 505 349 0420. And look, we can agree to disagree, or so they say. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like their opinions are equal to the facts that contradict those opinions. Same thing with chemtrail believers. Like, look, you're free to believe in it, but you can't be intellectually honest and assert this without making an argument from ignorance, because that's pretty much where it's coming from. You're not including the assessment, is it this or that? You're saying, what are they spraying? Instead of, is that a spray, or is it the result of hot jet exhaust and condensation in a thin atmosphere that's super cold? I mean, it's a way of framing a question that leads people to an answer, or even an uncertainty that's not warranted. Like, is it even a question? Like, sometimes raising a question is a way of asserting a false premise when there isn't really even a question. But one of their mantras is, you're all affected. You just don't want to admit it, or we're denying it. And that's a burden of proof thing. You can't say that I'm Mandela affected because you haven't proved it to exist. But to say that I'm affected and I'm in denial, it's like being in a religious cult and saying everybody else is going to hell because they don't come to church with us. Okay, you can believe that. You can call me affected. You can say I'm hellbound. But it's just us versus them labeling. No thanks. Isabel Ann has joined us. Says, hey, I'm late to the raft. Text alerts are going to resume soon, but you can always get the archives. Just go to ips.monster, sign up for the newsletter. Again, I'm going to leave phones open for a while. I've been working on a few different designs, again, for the star, and probably starting off on the new year. I'll just make it a New Year's thing. The first person to get the pop quiz right will be given a coupon code, and you'll go to the IPS store and you'll order yourself a 3-inch by 3-inch gold star with a 33 on it. I put some lettering at the bottom, which you'll see if you win one. Dinah South says, hey Bill, have you stopped beating your wife? Exactly. The smuggled question. You can't answer it because without giving in to the premise. And when they say, what are they spraying? I'm saying that question is a carefully crafted deception. It's meant to get you to accept the premise that there's a spray, and then you don't know what they're spraying. And if you don't know, and he doesn't know, now you're both just asking questions, what is it? What is that spray? And now you're trying to figure out what the spray is. Well, you didn't establish that there was an actual spray. Like when you see a motorcycle or a dirt bike going across the desert and you see dust behind it, you don't say, what is it spraying? You know it's the dirt, the dust. It's being unsettled by the tire. So if I were to say, hey, what is that motorcycle spraying? You would say, oh, that's not spray, that's dirt. The tire and the dirt. And you'd explain the mechanics of the dust cloud behind the vehicle. And similarly, there is a mechanical explanation for the generation of anthropogenic cirrus clouds, which I would contend are beautiful. And they only form at certain altitudes, at certain temperatures, with certain engines. There's a reason for it. And it has to do with, again, hot air, condensation. It's easy to explain. And even if it was a spray, there's not enough material in a single airplane to actually disperse that much spray over those long trips. I mean, it's not a spray, is my point. It's like a wake. Mango Penguin says, you're on the ball. Tim, better than my local news. On the ball. A little bit of subconscious reinforcement there. Yeah, Skype is open if you want to call in. Okay, you know what? Sorry about that. My ringer was off. It's on again, so if you want to call back. You can Skype in Infinite Plane Radio. I might even just call you back. Okay, here we go. I see. If you're a Skype user, I have to accept, so just go ahead and join me on Skype, and then I'll accept you. Infinite Plane Radio, can you hear me okay?
Hello,
Hey, what's up?
Tim. Do us in power in the chat.
Oh, nice, nice. Glad to finally have you on.
Calling from tomorrow. It's Christmas here.
Oh, awesome. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, thank you. Same to you guys. Hey, listen, I was calling in about just like I've heard it mentioned a few times, over the past months, whatever it is, like kind of the triggering of chemtrails and just auto hoax in general, and like recognizing that there's a certain triggering in myself too, and rather than sort of pick a side, like no auto hoax for life or no these things are real or whatever it is, I've sort of been going through this process of recognizing like why I even feel a little bit triggered with those sort of things. And I think what it is, it's like, I think you mentioned it sometime, like, if chemtrails was a thing, you know, we'd be, going to the government and saying, look, they're poisoning us and all the rest of it. But I don't think it's that. I don't, that's why people, chemtrail, truthers will vape, whatever else. I think it's more of a thing of just, truthers become comfortable with their perspective of what life is. And then all of a sudden, like this whole new thing comes along, media fakery, fakery and all the rest of it. And I think that the threat is more one sort of perspective of life. Like here are these red pillars, they've got it figured out, and these blue pillars know nothing. And then all of a sudden, red pillars, quote unquote, are confronted with this notion that, well, maybe they're duped as well. So I think that's where the triggering is. That was the impetus for calling in any case.
Okay, yeah, I get that. It's almost like the sunken cost fallacy, where they've invested so much into something and they're comfortable and then it gets taken away. I had that myself when people were saying, "Do you trust history?" Because I thought I had a grasp of history. And then I'm like, "Wait, do I really know this?" And I wasn't comfortable just saying I don't know any of that. And it is that. I think there's a difficulty in saying I don't know, which is really the starting point for wisdom, assessing your premises and what you started with.
Yes, and so like if you sort of to expound on that, that there was once a time, the Dark Ages, or whatever the recent sort of analogous time frame to that could be, where there was a drought of information, and like it was very hard to come by any sort of information, or you had to go through the priest class or whatever it is. Whereas now it's once those little sort of trickles of information started coming out, it's very hard to sort of stop those gaps. So the they, whoever they are, it seems that what they did is, right, okay, look, information's leaking through, let's flood them. And then there's this whole flood of information, and and then there's AI generated images, and it gets to the point where it's just like, for especially these people that sort of, we thought we'd figured out what was going on to some sort of extent, and you look back at yourself from 5 years ago and just go, oh my god, I had no idea of what was really going on. And then if you sort of extrapolate that into the future, it's like, well, in 5 years time, I'm probably going to have no idea. I'm probably going to look back at me now and just go, wow, what a dupe I was. So now me personally, I'm at this sort of point where I've just got no idea. And it takes me back to that Bill Hicks, Alex Jones. There was a bit that he did, it's weird because it sort of struck me at the time. It's like a preemptive kind of deja vu. Where there was this bit that he did, like CNN and the news, and it's like there's famine, war, death, rabid dogs, and then he looks out his window, and there's nothing. And so where I've kind of come to is that whether stuff is fake or real, when I look out my window, there's nothing. And it's sort of like it gets into this sort of, I don't want to say solipsism, but almost close to that, where the only peace or relief comes from just going, look, I know absolutely nothing. And it seems like with auto hoaxing and I think maybe what rubs people the wrong way is it seems to be what you're doing or potentially is just like, let's just scratch everything, like back to the drawing board. And let's at least first, and it has to be a very strict kind of diagnosis of media. Let's see if, just everything is fake until we can actually prove that this is real. Because without that sort of consistent measuring stick, we've got nothing. And the reason I say that is just because it might help to bring more people or just open their minds a little bit to just kind of recognizing the conflict within themselves. Because I think some stuff out there is still real. But people call in and say, look, this is real, and Tim, you're wrong. That's not where I'm at. I'm more just kind of, trying to recognize the nature of the conflict in myself. So I guess that's the main reason I wanted to call in.
Yeah, actually, these are great points because what we're not doing is engaging in nihilism or saying that knowledge is useless or we can never know. And that's why I think we have to cling to objective reality, and there has to be a way to test. So the Auto Hoaxology 101 textbook is an attempt to create a framework. So it's not like in 5 years that book is not going to be outdated because it's not making assertions about this is real, this is fake. It's just a framework for analyzing media. But I think the next step is to take the think tank out on the road and engage on issue by issue with things that have never really been debated before and then really establish what can we say we know versus what we can merely believe. So in other words, going out and seeing how far we can make it to the edge before we hit a wall with every single topic. And I think that is the next step. The next step is to make this form of media analysis intelligible to the blue pill world by bringing it down to almost like I'm comparing the future here, my plans, to a lot of these debates that were very popular a few years ago with Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, and a few others, where they were debating atheism with theologians. And I'm not an atheist necessarily, but their argumentation was really getting down to burden of proof and what you can claim to know versus what remains in the purview of mysticism or mere belief systems. And I think that needs to happen again, but this time not from an atheist versus religion, but from a skeptic versus mass media, which I contend is, of course, the de facto world state religion. So my intention here is to use debate and discussion and dialogue to draw these lines and then fight over that line and see where they can defend and what they can stand by.
Well, on that point, yeah, I agree. But when you talk about taking the think tank, out on the road, sort of to who? You mentioned the blue pillars there, and I think it's more to try and catch the red pillars. I think the blue pillars are really lost. I don't think there's anything. Two and two is five as far as they're concerned. It's more the red pillars that you've referenced before that are kind of fence sitters or not necessarily, dogmatic about a particular belief, and they're kind of looking around, but how would you bring that think tank to the road? Because we get back into that age old problem of like trying to convince. Like I gave up on that a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, and trying to convince. So we're kind of it's almost like it's thrown us back into that thing, but with a new sort of bone to chew. And it's like no, I'm not trying to convince you that this particular conspiracy is real or this particular conspiracy is real. Actually, trying to convince you that it's all fake. Everything's fake. It's sort of like have we set the bar too high there or?
Well,
Yeah.
my next step is this. What I'm contending here is that no, you cannot wake the blue pill dreamers, and they're happy. Why bother? I believe we can break off the guard railing on the political horseshoe on the red pill side, on the far right side, and breaking that down, breaking down false flag theory, a number of these gate kept issues, and they will then reach the conclusion of media skepticism from our perspective, fake until proven real. But my intention here is to debate things in a more public forum. on these red pill issues, which will necessarily gather the attention of the blue pill media world in some sense. And my intention here is if we can make enough noise, then anybody out there on the skeptical level we are when it comes to basic media claims will maybe find their way to the off-world stage perspective, more than likely than getting caught up in the whole Alex Jones, QAnon, Trump circus. So no, my target market though is definitely red pill.
Or maybe you can't feed everybody. It's like a food shelter. Maybe it's enough just to sort of have people here. And I know that there is some pushback, and I'm sure everybody has a little bit of pushback because everybody's going through their own little process of you know trying to sort of pinpoint what their resistance to these new ideas is. So maybe it's enough to just have a quote unquote food shelter that sort of feeds the people in this sort of chat. Maybe that's enough. Because what would you like us to go out and to talk about what's happening in the Middle East with like that? It's so divisive that like just broaching that in any sort of forum is just going to garner like civil war again. So it's very hard to pick a particular topic and really present it as something that could be discussed as and is there a happy medium? I know that like from a binary sort of point of view, you have to assume that until you have absolute proof of something that you can verify first person, then it has to be sort of considered fake. But this sort of like neglects a human instinct to try and see into the future, or to try and anticipate what might be coming, or even to try and form an idea of what's happening in the world. So it becomes very hard to sort of separate those two things. Like, these are the facts, just the facts, ma'am. But also, what do these facts mean? If I want to take these facts and speculate as to what it means, it's very hard to separate those two things. And I've just noticed with callers that will call in, some of them that might be sort of triggered, and then you'll get a little triggered. It's like I'm just sort of sitting on the sidelines here, like going like, this doesn't have to be a trigger event here from either side. It's just like, it just seems that what's missing is that natural desire to try and have some sort of understanding of the direction of things, because humans, we are naturally like that. We try and store up enough food to last through the winter. We do try and there's the road's closed up ahead, let's take a detour. So it is natural for us to try and navigate the future. So it's therefore natural for us to try and speculate as to what the future may bring. And in this particular infinite plane society, it's kind of like in every other, whether it's the blue pills, the red pills, or they've got this. I don't like, it is sort of dogmatic, but they've got their formula of what's happening in the world, and go out, live rurally, or listen to government or whatever it is. But they've got that kind of, and whether it's legitimate protection against the future or not, they still feel that they have it. And it's almost like you talk about breaking the guardrail. You're also trying to sort of break people's psychological crutches to having any sort of protection against the quote unquote future. And maybe that's a healthy psychological thing, but maybe those crutches can be taken away a little too early.
Yeah, it's a paradigm shock that is up ahead. And what I intend to do here is, with every one of these issues, I want to just establish a line, and that line needs to be it needs to delineate between beliefs and knowledge, and it's all about intellectual honesty. Like, do I know this, or do I merely believe it because I don't have facts? And I'm my target here is, I'm at war with belief systems as a poor substitute for knowledge systems, given that we're in the age of information. And we're operating from a position of knowing that we're being lied to, and therefore not accepting the beliefs. And it leaves us in a different area. It advances into a form of agnosticism, but this form of skepticism as a permanent posture, as a way of life, as a way of looking at things, harkens back to Pyrrho and the very original skeptics, where they said that since you can't verify everything, suspend judgment until you can. And you're therefore left believing less, scared less, and happier. And you reach a state of quiescence, which they actually had a name for, ataraxia, which they said is a state of peace of mind, that tranquility, that you could exist in if you don't preemptively react to things you can't verify. So what I'm pointing out here is that we can make the solid case that the mass media propaganda matrix is bad for our mental health for a lot of reasons. It is definitely mind war, not to mention the stress effects, but that you can voluntarily, conscientiously object to the war by adopting a new philosophical posture. So my objective isn't really to change the world or break the mainstream media and its stranglehold, but rather I want to foment a culture of disbelief and create a platform for sane people to have a different way of approaching media. And I think we're going to fill in what I think is a vacuum that has yet to really be pointed out. And I think this is a vacuum
Well,
where,
well, you
yeah,
sorry, I was going to say go on, but you're probably ahead of the game there because this is going to become much more relevant when people start to realize that sort of all images, can like because there was so much faith in images before, NASA could put up whatever, and it's just faith, and so there is going to come a time when the Joe Normie is going to realize that well. It's almost going to do a 180, and it's just like well, even the normie is going to be well, what do we possibly believe in? And it's going to be some sort of government sanctioned, these images have been processed by government authorities and deemed to be true, and they'll be able to say whatever they want to say, but it will become for anybody that has any modicum of a thinking mind will start to look elsewhere and say well, to get to the point that you're talking about there, what can we believe, and so maybe you're sort of ahead of the game there in creating a shelter ahead of
yes,
time
because
for
yes,
when the mass is rushing.
because
Yeah.
with a I call it desert of the designated real, because they're reaching this point on purpose. They want the public to recognize that, hey, we can no longer trust our own perceptions because we're reliant on the screen, and there's too much competition, and it's too easy to fake reality. So they're pretending like the fakeability of reality was just invented, as though they haven't been doing it this whole time. So the public will agree that there needs to be better regulation over information. This is all problem, reaction, solution. But I think we are ahead of the game. And that's why I think 2024 is key because we're going to jump ahead and we're going to aggregate anybody who is able to see the perspective that we have as far as this form of skepticism, which is just, it's not even radical, it's just applied skepticism. But I think that,
Well, you have to laugh at the irony, like because the skeptics, a true skeptic, used to be someone that the Hitchens and the four horsemen of the whatever it was there, with Dawkins and the rest of them, like to be a scientist was to be skeptic, and there was a correlation there with atheists as well. But now atheists, nasologists, and they're like the furthest from skeptics that anyone could possibly be, and there's just this irony that you just sort of have to step back and laugh at, really, just this upside down world that we live in, and you get to that point where maybe peace of mind is where it's just like I used to have hopes that I could put all the puzzle pieces together, and now I look at that person back in. I just find it hilarious to think. So now it really has. You used to trigger me with the popcorn thing years ago. It's like, well, what about my bullets? Like, I need my bullets, and they're hard to come by here in Australia. But the popcorn thing. But now I've come around to that, and it's like, yeah, like that really is the only logical way to play it. And you can still get triggered and everything when you see something, and I fight through. Is that real? What I pick up in. I'm noticing that there is a lack of dummies with missing limbs. Like I'm trying to sort of look and see, well, would there not be more missing limbs if it was
ooh,
legitimate here? Why?
yeah,
And that's one I've noticed. So when I'm my own critic, because like I'm the first to admit that to me, there's still a part of me that's fooled that something's going on over there because it's sort of like that old thing that quote unquote red pillars would never fall for before, which is like, well, it's such a big lie. It couldn't possibly be a lie because it's so big. And I notice myself falling into that very trap with what's happening over there now. And I'm like, well, okay, well, all these aren't these like, private citizen cameras and all the rest of it. It seems like it would almost be harder to sort of fake it than to do it. But then when I question myself and say, well, don't go too far into that, and I'll put Tim's cap on or Tim's lenses on, and I'll look at it and say, well, I'm not noticing. Wouldn't there be more of these bodies with limbs missing? I'm not noticing many limbless bodies here. So that was just a little thing that I picked up on that maybe you
yeah,
guys in
that's
the
a good
think tank
point.
can sort of run by.
Like one of the
Yeah.
things I bring up is that oftentimes the magic trick or the illusion is given away by what should be there but is conspicuously absent. And that's a big thing with the ISS. Things that are missing that should be there. When you look at it from that perspective, yeah, How many babies can you show me that have been destroyed by bombs that don't have any physical trauma, missing limbs or anything? It's like, what kind of bombs are they
Yeah.
using?
Yeah, maybe a few of them, but there should be some, where it's like, and if you just look at them, because there's no shortage of quote unquote dead bodies to look at, but even statistically, there should be a few, and they're not worried about sensitivities, like, oh, look, we don't want to show a body missing a leg or anything. Like, they're happy to show bodies. So, like, statistically speaking, there should be, like, we're talking about bombs here. We're not talking about, stabbings. We're talking about bombs. There should be, more bodies with at least a foot or two missing here and there.
Oh,
So that's
yes.
probably the one thing where I look at and I go, okay, there is something to this. Um,
And one
yeah,
thing
over
that
to you.
struck me the first time I went into a city morgue, it was in Richmond, Virginia, and they serve like a lot of areas, and the place was huge, and they had a whole section for John Does going back decades that can never identify, and they had a room where all these corpses were lined up with these metal rods that showed where the bullets went in and out. But one thing that really struck me when I first saw like a lot of dead bodies in a room is how they're not comfortable sleeping. They don't look peaceful like in the movies. They're always contorted and distorted in the strangest, especially if it's trauma. And it's just like it's unsightly, and a lot of people, are
Mm.
put off by this. And so when I see these dead bodies, I'm like, you know what? I've seen from many different situations, and I don't see any evidence of um, rigor mortis or the body's getting stiff in a certain position. You never see the slack jaw, the open eyes. But another thing too is when you transport the bodies, we put the heads up on blocks because the whatever's in the stomach is going to come out the mouth. And when they're holding these bodies and waving them around, you would expect if you were actually like in the embalming room, if you handled a body like that, stuff would come out. And you wouldn't handle a body
Wow.
like that. The way they handle the bodies is just irreverent, and it's not how you would really hold a dead person, in my opinion.
And this is what movies have done to us, right? Like like you have firsthand experience with it, but my experience, which I consider to be firsthand, is what I've seen in the movies. Like the damage that movies in general have done to a perspective, to smudging a person's lens. And I know that you talk about the screen. It's not a lens. It's a screen. It's not a lens, and that's so true. But just because you have this feeling that, yeah, I've seen Die Hard and all these movies where I know what a dead body looks like, and it's like I really don't. I really have no idea. And so, and of course the thing to mention as well is like we think, well, look at the sophistication of our technology, our phones, and each person's ability to report on what they see. Surely that can't be duped. But it's not as if whoever they are, haven't been aware of ahead of time of this need, and so the sophistication of the duping would have to have accelerated beyond what we could imagine. And I think our failure to recognize that the progress and the sophistication is in large part reason for why most of us truthers get caught up again in the divide and conquer of whatever the next big thing is.
Scale. Yeah, it's a scale thing. That's a difficult thing to grasp, and like 9/11 for me is a big key event because it shows how monolithic and uniform the reporting is globally. They're all on the same sheet, but people say, well, how could they do it? It's so big. It's a big building, big downtown. Well, they don't know, or the people who would assert that this is even like hard to believe, well, maybe they don't know that there were dozens of drills being performed. There were 1,000 police officers doing simulated casualty events that day, and you can look at these reports. And if you put two and two together, clearly they had the manpower to perpetuate such a hoax, to clear the area of any non actors, and to turn a downtown area into a movie set for a temporary period of time. They do it all the time with psyops. What they're doing is they're creating closed movie sets.
Yes, and they're creating an excuse ahead of time. For whatever reason they had to abort the thing. Well, they've already presented their excuse ahead of time. We're just running a drill. And it's if they think that everything's going fine, well, all of a sudden it becomes real. Or it becomes reported on as real. And whatever becomes reported on in the history books, like that is a fact. It's you can argue with things that happened maybe a few days ago, but for whatever reason, when it's written in those history books, like, it goes back 20, 30 years, well, that's obviously true. But hey, Tim, I didn't want to monopolize too much of your time, but I just thought, might be quiet over there, and I thought I'd, finally call in and say g'day.
Yeah, hey, thanks for
Um,
calling. Appreciate it very much. Often, I mean, awesome comments, and we'll continue to flesh out some of these ideas. And call back anytime. I've added you to my Skype. We all appreciate the call.
Thanks, Tim. Have a good night. Bye
You
bye.
too. Merry Christmas. All right, got our first caller of the evening. And one other point here is when you see a event on TV like the 9/11, you don't have enough information to know it to be true. You can decide to believe or you can withhold judgment. It's your only option. Believe or not to believe. And I'm in the camp of non-belief. I don't think that I need to be part of a belief system anymore. I think I can go off of knowledge. This is an age of information, and if I can't verify it, I'm not going to pretend to believe it. Because clearly, the power elite rule through belief systems that they control. It's the knowers controlling the believers, and at the bottom, it's all these subjective belief systems that are, contradictory, sometimes mutually exclusive. And when you get into the politics of it, you can see that it's definitely bifurcated. We're so compartmentalized as a society. But yeah, it's important to note that on something the scale of 9/11, there were thousands of people poised and ready to simulate what happened that day. And then, did it happen that day, or did they simulate it? As a general rule, if they can simulate it as a mass casualty event, and as in convincingly, if they can simulate it as a mass casualty event on camera, then they can do it on the news. If they can fake it in the movies, they can fake it on your nightly news. What's the difference? And this is where the people who debate against the flat earth versus, the whole globe thing, if they're debating against flat earth from the globe perspective, this is really what I think gets them wrong. What starts the debate off from a faulty starting point is at no point do they include fakeability or movie magic. Arguing from NASA as though it's all scientific evidence, not including the fakeability is by definition, I think that, the belief system here that we're in, the mainstream dominant belief system, I think it's designed so that you can't really test its edges, that you're reliant on your experts, your elevated priesthood, your astronauts to get you those views. And as they move us into an increasingly locked down society, as they get people to agree with the idea that the metaverse is preferable, no need to fly, it's bad for Gaia, we're just going to go deeper into illusion. And I do think that is the objective. I think we're actually going into a dark age for the masses. It's just like the movie Wall-E. I think that's the best description of what our future is going to be. Some AI god takes over, regulates everything. Robots make it easy for you to do nothing. Just stay home. Consume. And this disconnection from objective reality is actually, I think, an ancient form of control. Superstition, religion, these are all things that the elite use to control people. Ancient mind control, just new technology. All right, let's see here. Flatlander Montgomery says, from a family of firefighters, paramedics, and police officers, I'm told car explosions are super rare. Well, one of the points brought up in the call, a lot of the movies do condition us to accept what we see on the news as inevitable, realistic, and believable. That's the very purpose of predictive programming. I was thinking about how prior to 9/11, so many action movies seem to include jet fuel as a character. Like, did jet fuel ever get an award, an Emmy? Like, jet fuel, actor of the century. And they use jet fuel in all these movies, I believe, as part of this general buildup so that you're always associating crashed planes with just unlimited destruction and stuff just burning. Then 9/11 happens, and yeah, of course the buildings are going to melt and fall, even though it had never happened before. And still to this day, are people going to question the official narrative that's stood the test of time? No. It's going to be the one that gets carved into the stone. All right, let's continue here. We covered a lot of topics today. Here's an interesting one from Vice. Scientists explain why doing your own research leads to believing conspiracies. Researchers found that people searching misinformation online risk falling into data voids that increase their belief in conspiracies. Kind of like Nikki Haley said, for every 30 minutes that you watch TikTok, you become 17% more anti-Semitic. So every hour is 34%. I mean, okay, that's kind of precise, but just a few hours, and then you're full blown, neo-Nazi. That's what happened to Caleb 5, I think. But that's Nick Haley. Nikki Haley's making this argument that we all need to be online by our own names, can't be anonymous anymore. TikTok makes you into an anti-Semite or something. Like every hour you listen to Infinite Plane Radio, you become 5% more of a disbeliever in mainstream narratives. We should get someone to do a study, we can publicize it. But this is true though. It is true. It is true that if you're doing your own research, you will likely, if you're going to find an alternative belief system, you're going to believe conspiracies. Keyword being believing. It doesn't say, scientists explain why people doing their own research find out what's true. Or people doing their own research eventually know what they're talking about. It doesn't say that. It says they believe conspiracies. So for example, everybody believes in climate change, but I'm going to do my own research. Now I believe in geoengineering and chemtrails. Well, you're still just a believer. So it's an alternative belief system, alt media. So it doesn't take a scientist or a rocket surgeon to explain why somebody going against mainstream is going to find an alternative belief. Because alt media is alternative belief. And that's one of my key points today, is that what we're branching off into is a non-believer. It's a non-belief system. It's a what do they call it? The Mental Immunity Project said that they're worried about people falling into cultures of disbelief. Well, yeah, we're deliberately fomenting a culture of disbelief. Absolutely. We are non-believers in your fake MSM religion. And if something is true, it will stand on its own. I mean, the truth is usually self-evident. It doesn't need a bunch of shills constantly repeating it. But the fact is that they are making the point, and it is true, that you got mainstream belief and alt belief, and neither of them know. That's why just to go back one more time to the flat versus round debate, it's belief system versus belief system. I don't have use for either. All right, let's see here. Going through some comments. We're watching the right wing becoming increasingly anti-Satan in their rhetoric, getting very black and white, good versus evil, destroying statues. Nick Fuentes calling for the execution of witches and people doing magic and reading their horoscopes. Also, right-wingers are getting swatted. Still waiting for Alex Stein to get swatted. Just need a hit of attention. Just tell everybody on Twitter that you almost got killed by cops because somebody called in. It doesn't work that way. A retired police officer called me once and talked about this, that the process of getting somebody swatted is more than just a phone call with an immediate response. It doesn't happen that way. 777 is 666 on Twitter. Message me. This is interesting. We've all seen this bit of predictive programming from Cookie Monster eating the World Trade Towers. This is from 1976. 1976. Cookie Monster destroying the Twin Towers. Monsters on the loose. Well, what he did is he found out that the date from the publication of that book to 9/11 was 9,111 days. Interesting. If you backdate some of the predictive programming, does it connect to 9/11 in terms of the number of days from its publication to the date? More evidences of news bending. That's how they bend our reality. They bend the news, just like they bend the horizon. Tim Osman says a belief. Yeah, there you go, a belief. And here's the thing too. I don't make arguments from incredulity. Finding something unbelievable isn't a good enough reason to say it's not true, if the facts support it. And this is where it gets into intellectual honesty and backing your claims and standing by your initial claim. Where if something disproves it, you have to debunk it. You have to just drop it. If something's not falsifiable, it's not true. That's just like a basic thing. Like for example, if there's a conspiracy theory that nothing you say will prove it wrong, then it's a belief system, like the Mandela Effect. Nothing debunks it. I can debunk any Mandela Effect you name, but the Mandela Effect itself is going to remain intact. It's very slippery, but it's not a legitimate attempt to understand reality. It's a collection of things that they've all come to believe in. I like that word though, a belief. But for example, if you were to get a ticket with NASA to take a trip to the space station and you took a picture from the cupola of the Earth with your iPhone and then the inside, and you tossed your iPhone around so it floats around the room a little bit, and I don't see any wires and I don't see any harnesses, I'm going to believe in outer space. But I'm not going to believe it until I get evidence that convinces me it's believable, that it's true. I mean, I want to know it's real. I don't want to be a mere believer. And I'm waiting for someone to get the motivation to do something, to prove their globe unequivocally for all time, to just be the ultimate flat earth slayer. But they think they can do it on the internet by arguing with people and engaging in ad hominem attacks. Okay, let's continue through my notes. I had a few other things I wanted to get to today. We're just going through my Twitter feed. Who's JFK Jr. this week? I haven't kept up with that one. Although I'm pretty sure that John Fetterman is Ashton Kutcher in a grotesque costume. Let's see here. Next big thing, of course, we're waiting on Godzilla, the nuke. We're waiting for something as prophesied in the Barack Obama movie. So if there's a blackout in the next 24 hours, I'll probably try to go live like right after and cover it for those of you who aren't in the affected areas. But I just want to say preemptively that it's not Chinese space planes, it's not domestic violent extremist white nationalists, it's the PSYOP entertainment complex. And you can reach for your popcorn or your ammo, your choice. I think you all know where I would choose. Okay, here's a video from this little display here at Times Square, 27 billboards going dark. Again, we've been talking about predictive programming for blackouts, and specifically over the Christmas holiday, as the movie prophesied. And for the first time ever, Times Square goes dark. This is connected. So there we go. Something's up. Cygirl says the Japanese invented Godzilla, a movie allegory for nukes. Hiroshima. Exactly. Exactly. And he was born on November the 3rd, which is a very significant day. Ties into the Kraken. And it's the date of the One World Trade Tower, so it connects to Ground Zero, which all ties in to this body of symbolism and predictive programming that correlates Godzilla, the biblical beast of the sea, the nuke, the submarine from Hunt for Red October. It all builds up to something pointing at the West being hit with a nuke. That's what it's been pointing at. And specifically, last solstice, so 6 months ago, we were all watching as the Titan went down to the ocean to go visit the Titanic, and it imploded. And in the recent Godzilla movie, he was dragged down to the bottom of the ocean so he could be imploded. Godzilla cancers the crab, the Kraken. Godzilla obviously fits that. And what's more, he just turned 69. And the symbol of Cancer, the crab, is the 6'9". So the fact that they imploded him is very significant. So we're looking at, right now, 6 months later, if that movie was a prophecy or a foreshadowing, I would expect, based on everything we've seen, and again, if we're going to use predictive programming as a predictive model, we have to be able to make these types of, I won't say guesses, but we have to make these, I would say, it's not even a guess. I'm going to call it a prophecy. I mean, at this point, it's safe to say that the people that control the media, like J.P. Morgan alluded to, care very much about astrology. that they care very much about it and they encode it into everything. So making predictions like this isn't a matter of being psychic or guessing. This isn't even guesswork. It's like you're reading a book, just some mainstream novel, and you can guess by chapter 5 what's going to happen in the resolution. And that's what we're doing. We're offering spoilers. Spoilers on reality. And that's why I don't mind giving spoilers on these movies, because what we're giving spoilers on are much more important than what happens at the end of some movie. You know, we're talking about the big movie, the big show, the world stage meta script as it unfolds. All right, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks again to the caller and all the chats. I'm going to turn it back on over to 24/7, and we will be live tomorrow. And you can get the archives if you go to ips.monster. This is Lucifer Tim, 33rd degree. And stay tuned for the 24/7.
To see what it could be. It said this is the court of the 35th degree. I was taken aback a little suddenly as I looked to scans at this door in front of me. Yes, there was a black lady stating it to be the Supreme Court of the 35th degree. 35th degree. 35th degree. What we all need. I sat my days upon a across until I saw the most amazing thing. The sun and moon are closing in, and all the people carried on down below, just because they don't know just what's really happening. The sun and moon are closing in.
Better to admit that you were psychologically manipulated. As Mark Twain said, though,